Welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. AP classes are meant to be challenging, but they're not meant to feel overwhelming every single day. In this presentation, we're going to talk about why AP stress spikes so often in the spring, and more importantly, how students can manage AP classes more effectively without sacrificing confidence, performance, or well-being. This isn't about doing less, it's about doing what actually works. One of the most important things to understand about AP stress is that it's usually not a motivation problem. Most AP students are already working hard. They're juggling heavy workloads, staying up late, and trying to keep up with expectations that just keep rising. When stress shows up, it's often because students are working hard without a system, not because they don't care. AP exams are designed to be difficult. They don't just test whether a student completed assignments or memorized content. They test whether students can apply what they've learned under time pressure in unfamiliar situations. This graph shows the breakdown of AP scores across all subjects in 2025. The most common score was a 2, which is a failing score. Only about a fourth of test takers earned the coveted 4s and 5s that typically grant college credit. And you only have one shot at an AP exam, so it's no surprise that APs bring a lot of stress. But today, we're going to talk about low stress AP success. When we talk about low stress AP success, we're not talking about lowering expectations. We're talking about balancing three outcomes at the same time: strong AP exam scores, strong course grades, and a workload that's sustainable over months, not just short bursts. When one of these breaks down, stress rises quickly. For many students, spring is when AP stress peaks. The pace accelerates, the material becomes more complex, and the AP exam starts feeling very real. Without a plan, this is where students often feel like they're losing control. Another big factor is sheer volume. Many students aren't just taking one AP class, they're taking 2, 3, sometimes 4 or more. And each AP class is designed as if it's the only advanced class the student is taking. Individually, each course might feel manageable, but together, the workload stacks up quickly. You might be one of those lucky students who has managed to find a balance in AP coursework, and if so, that's amazing. But as spring ramps up, it's important to recognize that those good grades won't necessarily translate to AP exam readiness. After all, AP exam success requires that you be able to recall details from way back in September, recognize and understand patterns across the entire year's worth of material, and memorize huge amounts of information. Classroom grades reward consistency and completion. AP exams reward depth, application, and strategy. Confusing the two often leads to last-minute stress. One of the most common habits we see is the belief that there will be plenty of time to prep for AP exams later. You've still got more than 3 months left, so what's the hurry? But remember, AP exams are really, really hard, and you have to do a ton of work over and above your usual workload to properly prepare. And time's already a-wasting. Starting earlier means that you'll be able to work smarter instead of harder. The good news is that now is the perfect time to start AP exam prep. This is the reset moment when you can stop reacting to deadlines and start managing your workload intentionally. What reduces stress isn't more effort, it's having a framework. A clear system helps students make decisions confidently, even when things get busy. Most students respond to academic stress by trying to do more studying, more work, more hours. But more hours without better systems just leads to burnout. Managing AP effectively means improving the process, not just increasing effort. Managing APs without the stress means better processes for planning, prioritizing, and following through on your AP exam prep. Everything that follows fits into 3 pillars that consistently reduce stress during AP exam prep season: planning backward, controlling the week, and studying for mastery. Successful students plan from the AP exam backward rather than guessing what will matter later. Not every topic appears equally on the AP exam. Understanding weight and frequency helps you focus where it counts. For example, this image is from the College Board's AP Chemistry breakdown. What it tells us is that topics from Unit 3, the properties of substances and mixtures, makes up 18 to 22% of the AP exam. These topics will show up almost 3 times as often as topics relating to chemical reactions or kinetics. Understanding what areas have the most impact on your exam scores lets you prioritize instead of stressing about every single potential topic on the exam. To figure out what's covered on the AP exam and how it's weighted, go straight to the source, the College Board. You can find the course at a glance for any AP subject on their website. These documents tell you every unit, how much of the AP exam will focus on that unit, all of the topics covered in that unit, and how topics relate to one another across units. This is a great resource for creating your initial topic list and prioritizing topics. Once you have a nice long list of topics you're going to need to review, it's time to rate your confidence in each one. Be honest with yourself as you consider your performance on quizzes or tests on each topic and how well you really remember the details of each topic. Give yourself a confidence rating from 1 to 5 for every specific topic you're going to review. Stress thrives on uncertainty. When students clearly identify what they know and what they don't, those unknowns become clearer and more manageable. Once you have your list of topics and a sense of your own confidence, it's time to start prioritizing what to cover in your study sessions. After all, you have limited time in which to study a pretty large amount of material. You'll need to decide where best that time can be spent. You'll want to give the biggest priority to topics that were covered very early in the course, topics that you might have struggled with when you first learned them, topics you have doubts about, and topics that are likely to appear more frequently on your AP exam. You can give a lower priority to topics that likely won't show up as frequently on the exam, topics you already know really well, and topics that were covered in class pretty recently. This doesn't mean that you should skip studying these topics altogether, though. Just that you won't need to spend as much time focused on these topics as you will on the topics that you struggle with, that you may have forgotten, or that will make up a much bigger chunk of the AP exam. Finally, it's time to consider how you will review. Certain topics lend themselves to certain forms of review. It's helpful to identify potential review strategies so that you have an idea of what resources and how much time you might need. Let's look at a review of the Constitution for AP US History as an example. You'll have plenty of terms to learn, and you'll need to know the contents of each piece of the Constitution. This very fact-based information is probably best reviewed using flashcards or a flashcard alternative, which means you can do review in bits and pieces as you have time. You'll need to know how the Constitution compares with the Articles of Confederation. Developing a deep understanding of that kind of relationship will take more time. You'll probably want to create a graphic organizer, reorganize your notes on that idea, and then maybe do a few practice questions. And you'll need to understand the role of federalism and the separation of powers in other historical events, like the antebellum era. And for that, you're not only going to want some kind of graphic organizer like a timeline, but you'll also want to dig up some good free response questions for practice. This one's probably going to take the most time to tackle. By going through the topics and deciding on strategies for review, you can better inform your study plans moving forward. Once the priorities are clear, then it's time to map backwards from the exam date. Decide when full review should start. Note, it should probably start in the next couple of weeks. When targeted practice should happen, and when content learning needs to be solidified. This prevents the all too common situation where you might realize a few weeks before the exam that you've run out of time. Planning backward turns the calendar into an ally instead of an enemy. But those long-term plans only work if weekly systems support them. So let's discuss the second pillar, control the week. Even when you have a solid long-term plan, stress can still creep in on a daily basis. One of the biggest reasons that students feel constantly behind is that everything feels urgent. Homework, quizzes, projects, readings, all of it competes for attention at the same time. When you don't have a system for deciding what matters this week, your brain treats every task like an emergency, and living in emergency mode is exhausting. To lower that daily stress, we zoom back out to your monthly view. Monthly planning isn't about scheduling every hour. It's about identifying what each AP class is demanding during that stretch of time. When you can see the month at a glance, you're less likely to be blindsided by overlapping tests or deadlines and still be able to incorporate your AP exam prep alongside your usual workload. This alone often reduces the feeling of why is everything happening at once. To map out your month, grab a calendar. Bonus points if it has pictures of cute animals because nothing lowers stress like cute animals. Use your calendar to map out which subjects you're going to study on which days. Take note of major tests that are coming up or projects that are going to be big time sucks that'll take away from AP exam prep. When you're deciding what to study and when, try to space out sessions for each subject. Studies show that spaced repetition promotes learning by making it just a little bit harder to recall information during your next study session. So let new information marinate in your brain for a few days before you study it again. The extra effort required to recall the information on that second study session helps to better cement the memory so that you can recall it on exam day. Once your month is planned out, it's time to narrow the focus to the week. Weekly planning answers one simple question: what actually needs my attention right now? Instead of juggling everything at once, you decide which subjects and topics are the priority for that specific week. This prevents the common trap of doing a little bit of everything and not making real progress on anything. A big key to controlling the week is balance. Do not overschedule yourself. It's tempting to create an ambitious study plan that assumes nothing will go wrong, no long assignments, no fatigue, no bad days. And when that plan inevitably falls apart, stress spikes. So when you plan your week, be realistic. If you have a big Spanish test on Friday, lighten up on your AP review schedule a bit. If you've got a debate tournament to prepare for, give yourself a few days off. It's better to give yourself the time you need on purpose than to overschedule yourself and feel bad for not getting everything done. And remember, sleep is in fact very important. Our last tip for controlling the week is to limit how long your study sessions are. If your study sessions are too long, you'll start to see diminishing returns. So instead of scheduling yourself for 1 3-hour study session, break it into 2 1.5-hour study sessions. You'll learn more and you'll be less stressed. Part of this is because your brain's working memory has limited capacity and it tires out pretty quickly. Working memory is kind of like your brain's waiting room. It's where new information sits before being processed for long-term storage. And working memory can't fit a ton of information. By giving yourself plenty of breaks, you let your brain process the new stuff before you add more in again. And not only are marathon study sessions less efficient, they're super stressful and can lead to burnout. And trust me, burnout has never led to better AP exam scores. When students know what they're working on and when they're working on it, stress naturally decreases. Predictability gives the brain permission to relax because there's no constant fear of forgetting something important. This is what it feels like to be in control of the week, even during a busy AP semester. Now let's discuss our last pillar, study for mastery, not just completion. This is one of the most important mindset shifts for AP students. Being busy feels productive, checking boxes, finishing assignments, turning things in, but busy does not automatically mean prepared. Many students feel confident right up until they see an AP style question that asks them to apply what they've learned in a new way. Studying for mastery means focusing on what you can actually do with the material and not just on what you've completed. Passive studying is another sneaky source of stress. Reading notes, highlighting textbooks, and rewatching videos can feel productive, but those kinds of activities don't reveal what you actually understand. Passive methods often create a false sense of security that disappears under test conditions. Active studying, on the other hand, retrieving information, applying it, making mistakes, builds the kind of confidence that really holds up on exam day. One great active studying strategy for AP exams is to rewrite and reorganize your notes. Gather all of your notes from the year, both lecture notes and notes you took while reading or studying for earlier tests. Pull out all your old tests and quizzes. When you're preparing for an AP exam, your teacher really should have been giving you tests that hit on the topics that are most likely to appear on exam day. So studying those tests can really be helpful. This will help you to reorganize the information so that you're prioritizing things properly. Consider color coding information by topic or by priority. This extra step forces you to engage with the information in more detail. And the multiple colors can help you create additional connections in your mind. And while you reorganize your notes, try to avoid typing them. Research shows that the effort of forming letters by hand helps you to more actively engage with the information and think more deeply about what you're writing compared to the relatively mindless act of touching a key on a keyboard. And by reorganizing and condensing your notes, you're essentially building a DIY study guide. To get the most out of it, interact with the material as much as possible and make it visually appealing. Use highlighters, colored markers, sticky notes, little drawings to note important points. In fact, doodles can help you retain information. One study found that students who doodled on their notes improved retention by 29%. It's not enough just to put information into your brain. You have to be able to get it back out again on test day. That's where practice tests come in. Now, a practice test does not have to be a formal test. Just quizzing yourself, having someone else quiz you, or doing flashcards accomplishes the same thing. The point of testing yourself as part of studying is to practice retrieving the information that you've stored. The more often you successfully retrieve a piece of information, the easier it becomes to do so in the future. And that's why multiple studies have shown that various means of tests are the best way to cement information in your mind. One final tip, keep your brain healthy. Healthy brains learn better, and there's lots of science to prove it. Some studies have found that regular cardio literally makes your brain bigger. Today's students are chronically sleep deprived, especially high school students and especially AP students. But that's not only harmful for your growth and your health, but also for your learning. Your brain processes and stores new information while you sleep. So if you're not getting enough sleep, a lot of your study efforts are just being wasted. And feed your brain properly. A well-fueled brain simply works better. Multiple studies have found a correlation between a diet high in refined sugars and impaired brain function. So if you want to learn better, eat some vegetables. And studies show that even mild dehydration hinders brain function. So if you want your study efforts to pay off, stay hydrated. Taking care of the brain isn't a luxury. It's part of an effective AP strategy. Real confidence doesn't come from crossing your fingers and hoping things will work out. It comes from evidence, from seeing your progress over time, recognizing patterns, and knowing exactly what still needs work. When you study for mastery, you replace anxiety with information, guessing with knowing. And remember, information is empowering. One final topic to discuss before we wrap up for the evening: when and how to seek support for AP exam prep. I want to emphasize that needing support in AP classes or with AP exam prep is not a sign of weakness. AP courses assume that you already know how to plan long-term, prioritize effectively, and study strategically, but most students are never explicitly taught those skills. Even strong, motivated students can struggle when the workload ramps up and expectations change. Support fills in those missing systems so students don't have to figure everything out the hard way. Not all academic support does the same job. Tutoring is great for filling in content gaps. Coaching helps students build habits and accountability. Strategic planning helps to prioritize time and effort and prevents last-minute panic. For AP students, especially in the spring, the biggest stress relief often comes from having all three working together instead of trying to solve every problem with more homework help. At C2, we incorporate all of those methods to help students stay ahead in AP classes and get ready for AP exams without burning out. We work with students to build personalized plans that align classwork, exam preparation, and realistic schedules. Instruction is AP aligned, but it's also strategic, focused on what matters most and when it matters most. Most importantly, students aren't doing this alone. They have guidance, structure, and accountability that helps to keep stress from piling up. Thank you for spending your time with us this evening. If there is one takeaway that we hope you leave with, it's this: AP success doesn't require constant stress. It requires the right systems. If you'd like help putting these strategies into action, we invite you to connect with us for a conversation about your students' goals and AP plan. And with that, we are happy to start taking your questions.